All right, so a couple episodes back, we critiqued the movie The Lost Daughter, which featured Paul Mescal. He actually had a scene with, I think, Olivia Colman.
Yeah, and it was another film where the lead performer got an Oscar nomination and didn't win, but we'll see if Paul has the chance to win now.
Right, yeah. We're recording this before Oscars have been, we know what's happening. We know about the nomination. So today we're going to talk about, comes from the UK, right?
I believe so. Charlotte Wells, yeah.
Aftersun.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals, as well as tell us what movies we should review in the future. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics' reviews as well as ours. And today we're going to talk about one that was nominated for Best International Film. It's already won Best Film from the New York Film Critics Circle, Outstanding Film from the Directors Guild, and Outstanding Film from BAFTA. It is Aftersun.
All right, so Sophie looks back on a holiday she shared with her father 2 decades prior. As she revisits her past, she has to face the father she remembers, as well as the man she thought she knew.
Okay, so this also won from Gotham Independent Film Awards, Best Breakout Director, Charlotte Wells. She written and directed this one as well. This wasn't accessible to us in America until what? Probably after the turn.
Like maybe January, late January. And the thing too is I seem to recall it maybe hitting my local theater for a week. But it was such an in and out quick week during like the height of the blockbuster season that I completely passed it up and was like, I'll see it when it hits streaming. And then it just took forever to finally hit. So
even though I'm considered a film critic, I don't get a lot of accessible stuff that does not until this gets a wide release. So it's not really part of my top 10 of December. I just got, even it was available for rental just within the last couple of weeks on Amazon Prime. So this is a late review. It's not for us. This is the first time we were able to get access to it. This is Charlotte Wells. She's done some short films and got notoriety with that. This is her full feature film. Starring Paul Mescal. He got famous for doing what's called Normal People.
Normal People hit in 2020. I think it was a limited series with, I can't remember her name now, but yeah, he kind of like broke out into that. I honestly had to look him up on The Lost Daughter because I couldn't remember who he played because it wasn't a large role.
It was that waiter guy that Olivia Colman, do I want to have a...
Yeah, now he's kind of getting, I don't want to say like a mini explosion because he was just cast in Gladiator 2. Of all things.
Gladiator 2?
So he'll be appearing as Commodus' son as an adult in that film. So very, very interesting there. And I think there's been a lot of like murmurs about MCU-related stuff. So, of course, like you get a nomination, you start to show up in a lot more things.
Of course. When you're a famous British actor and finally you got some esteem and credibility, what do? You play a ancient Roman.
Yep.
And
somebody's like, get me Ridley Scott.
And if you're Alec Guinness, if you're anybody who's an accomplished theater actor, you got to play an ancient Roman.
Yep.
So Paul Mescal. My God, because I was thinking, watching this movie, Jesse Buckley and him have to do a movie together. They're just so talented. And I was like, crap, Lost Daughter.
They both have those
But they didn't share a scene and do it right.
They've got those thick accents. Kyle needs to have some subtitles for that one, I think.
Right. They're both Irish. That's why I was like, they're both really good, talented acting.
Yeah.
So it's like somebody has to write something where Paul Mescal and Jesse Buckley are in a movie together and share a scene, even though they're both credited with The Lost Daughter.
Yeah.
So marketing, this is filmed I think on location in Turkey.
I believe in Turkey, yeah. But they had some read-throughs beforehand. I find it so fascinating, the prep work on this film, because on the surface, when you hear these stories about behind the scenes, you think like, well, that's a great idea, but I don't know how often I hear about it. First of all, that Mescal and the actress Frankie Corio, who plays his daughter Sophie, actually spent 2 weeks on holiday together to build a bond as father-daughter. Which I think is fascinating because, the whole film is based on that relationship. And if that relationship doesn't work, it doesn't matter how good you are as a director or not. The film doesn't work.
It's very much like Lost Daughter. You have to...
Yeah, it has to work. And if that relationship doesn't work at all. And they also did 2 read-throughs before going to Turkey, just kind of like in a location together. But what's interesting is that when Charlotte Wells did that, she excised any scenes that featured Mescal by himself. All the scenes where he's smoking, the scenes where he's kind of like having his time personally, she took that out because she didn't want actress Frankie Corio to know what Mescal's scenes were going to be like when he wasn't with her. So that way they can really focus on the man that she doesn't know behind the curtain. It's such a fascinating piece of prep that I never would have thought about, but it seems so obvious, you know?
Also in production, this actually is supposed to take place in late 90s, if you kind of notice. I don't know, it doesn't give you the exact dates, so it's like 1997, 98, maybe pushing 99. But it's very much the feel, the clothing, and the music. It gets this very much 90s feel to it. So when you watch it, it was like, costuming, it's like, yeah, this was very, even though it's in the UK, it's very much like the hair and everything, like very 90s, but it doesn't explain a lot. I'll talk about that more with my review.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was, I can't remember if I heard a line of dialogue that said 20 years or if it was just on the website as I was looking up more about the film.
They're doing
something
the Macarena for
20 years, yeah. And that was a nice indicator for me. It was like, okay, we see that passage of time, and it does help. And you know, I think when you kind of do the math, I had to figure out, you know, Paul Mescal's not that old, but then I'm like, oh, okay, so he must have had her young. Like, you have to do all these kind of like answers.
No,
I think
this scorts me because he's born in 1996, and he's making a movie that he's supposed to be in his 30s in 1996.
Everyone remembers when they're like, you know, 5 years old, what life was like.
I
and
graduated.
He got to go back there.
I graduated high school in 1996. My God. Okay. So yeah, and this is Charlotte Wells. This is her directorial, and I think it's her. She's written this too. It's her first full feature debut, and she's getting a lot of accolades for this. There's very much look up about her.
Yeah, not a lot of background about her currently, and I think that's just because she's done like 3 short films.
Yeah.
They've been pretty well lauded, but like,
I mean, she went, but she's master's arts at Oxford, so it's not like she's just a nobody. She's actually looks like she went to schooling to do artistry and filmmaking and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Same with the person that did All the Quiet on the Western Front. It looks like they came from an academic arts background before they made the movie.
Yeah, and Aftersun does appear to be the kind of movie that just really, really has a lot of less zeitgeisty elements to it. I mean, behind the screenplay and the direction, you also have Mescal, who, yeah, he appeared in a movie and on a show, but like, not really a household name. None of the actresses in the film.
And I did like his suit in the SAG Awards. What is he? I really like that suit.
But then you have like Oliver Coates doing the music, who I had to look up because I didn't know Oliver Coates.
Yeah. And editing is like, who the hell
editing. Yeah, it was all people that I'm sure that they're known to somebody, but they weren't known to me, and I consider myself pretty well known.
Well, if you're ready, up next is our review of Aftersun. You're the harshest critic. Go ahead.
You're damn right I am. And actually, I quite like the movie. Here's the weird thing about the film, though.
He said he liked it.
I felt...
Whoa. He said he liked it. Okay.
It didn't get my vote at the awards last weekend, but you know.
No,
but I felt very differently watching the film than I felt in the hours following watching the film. Because the term that I go up to with this film is devastating. That's how the film left me feeling, was devastated. But I never once felt that watching the movie. It was only once I reckoned with what was going on and kind of put those elements together in my head that it created a feeling hours later where I was thinking about it as I was falling asleep, how absolutely devastating this character Callum is.
Right. We don't know what his casualty, what was his fault, what he did.
Yeah, we have these hints, you know, these ideas, but we're never really given the answer, which I would say is maybe a flaw that we don't dive into it a little bit more.
Right.
But then also something that creates a feeling, creates a reaction in me. So
perfect way I want to explain it, because I think A.O. Scott hit it on the head, because this is not mechanical plot structure filmmaking. This is a thread of an emotional entanglement. It's almost like her recanting the experience rather than we go step A to plot point. And if I use a reference, I'll talk about Network, one of my favorite screenplays. That's a wonderful screenplay for me, very structured, sound and everything. But screenplay for Rocky came out at the same time. Very messy screenplay, but very palpable, very relatable, all about emotions.
Yeah.
And I play like this. This is not a mechanical script. I think there's probably a lot of loose things that like, let's shoot this, let's shoot this, let's shoot this. But I like the idea of the script because it's about a thread of an emotional retaining.
yeah.
Very much like they have the scene, they're just hanging out on the beach, and all of a sudden this sky comes on. And it's almost shot very avant-garde, where it could be. If you took a couple minutes of this movie and like, this is experimental film, you'll believe it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think she's going. It's not this mechanical traits like Tar. Let's show off how great we are with cinematography. Let's show what we point of view of how she feels hanging out with her dad.
Yeah, it feels
it's a
like
feeling.
Screenplays tend to fall into two different universal languages.
Yeah.
There's the universal language of math, which I would give to like Network. Network is a math film in that
Point
everything
A
is
to point B to
A,
point C. Yeah.
Things add up correctly. Whereas this film is more like the universal language of music. Whereas in everything is there, but it's interpreted differently, and it's all about the interpretation of the disparate elements that create what Aftersun is. And so that's why it made me hunger to learn a little bit more, but that's also not exactly the point, because Sophie doesn't know more. And we're seeing the film through her eyes. And I think maybe if we'd spent a little bit more time with adult Sophie, kind of having that, framing device where she goes back, because then I would have felt more like I was in Sophie's shoes, because I think that was the intention of the film.
Right.
All that being said, knowing that that's the intention of the film, that works really well for me, because I really wanted to understand the struggle of Callum.
Right. We don't know after the end, we don't know what happened.
No, we get these ideas. And I think that's part of it, is that, I always tell you I don't like loose end endings. This isn't really a loose end because it's not structured to have an ending. It's structured to have an emotional payoff.
This is where we stop.
Yeah.
And this is where she stops with her dad, and we don't know.
Yeah.
Because Charlotte Wells is very good at explaining to people that you don't give them a lot, you just give them enough that your brain fill in the details.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of like, your brain is like, something's askewed here. He's making up for something he did, and he's trying to appease it as best he can, trying to give her a little bit of instructions, trying to be a father, and it's awkward, but all relationships are awkward. And you get a lot of camera point of view that's very almost childish. These camera angles are like this, and it's very close up to areas where you're like, why are we so close up on this?
Yeah.
And it's very like the kids' point of view, because the kids are constantly looking at awkward angles throughout their whole life. And the danger of, can I go play with these kids? And the dad's like, okay, 1 hour.
Yeah.
And he's still, are you okay? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like this feeling each other out in the situation because they don't
Right,
live together. So they don't know each other's languages, And I think, looking at Callum, I'm seeing a lot of my worst elements, I guess, in Callum, is because I have anxiety, I have depression sometimes, and I've seen those elements in what he's doing, things like, saying I won't make it to 40, and, kind of just those moments where you just kind of lose yourself alone in a room. I saw a lot of those elements.
And the risk take of him walking off into the ocean, which Olivia Colman did that in The Lost Daughter, too.
Yeah.
I don't know why we got to present that
but
movie.
even just moments where, like, he's comfortable with the idea of them going up on stage and singing, but not now. Like, not when it actually is about to happen. When she goes up stage and she sings the song, and you can see him literally imploding with his nerves because he doesn't want to go up there and sing. And it's like the idea of like, it sounds good at the time, but when you force me to do it, I don't want to do it. I shrink back into myself,
It's devastating, but it's almost what I want to attach another adjective. It's logical devastating. It's almost like he's trying to correct something he knows eventually it's going to fall apart. And you're probably going to think I'm an awful person afterwards, but let's have this time here.
Yeah.
And that's the freeze frame of her saying goodbye, and she smiles, and that's the pinnacle of whatever he's going to capture.
Yeah, and the idea too, you have him having her with the camera too, and it's a camera that actually is his. So he's going to take the memories and use those when he needs that lift me up, and he's creating this idea of the great holiday that she's always going to remember, but it's really the holiday that he needs to remember.
Yes.
So it's just a heartbreaking movie, but I never thought about that at all while I was watching it. It's got a very different feeling to it. And that's what I think is so dynamic and interesting, is that I can't even describe part of the film. I'm describing how I feel about the film after the fact.
No, it's devastating, but it's not horrifying. It's not like a horror
exactly.
movie.
It's a very sweet, tender movie. There's a lot of times I chuckled and smiled at just these little moments that they shared. And maybe it was because we knew they were fleeting.
I agree. Because you have, like I said, it's not a mechanical step point A plot. It's all about the thread of emotions. And you have it's a very experimental movie. I don't know if Charlotte likes that style. She might be just the style for what she thought the movie needed, or she's going to maintain something like this afterwards. But it seems very necessary to almost seem constantly experimental. Yeah. I love that about the movie. There's a lot of times where it looks like it's a home video. Like I'm watching a home video.
Yeah, I kind of lost myself in what parts of it were that DVX kind of camera that they were actually filming with, and what parts were actually meant for the film. Like which cameras were being used when. You get kind of lost in that. You can see that Charlotte Wells is basing this on her relationship with her father. She said so in interviews after the fact. Like, you can see how personal the film is because she's kind of psychologically messing with us as viewers. You know, not to get a play out of it, but like really putting us in those shoes of one character or the other. And it's like kind of terrifying how good she was at that.
No, dialogue is very fluid, very much natural, very much dad and daughter trying to, you know, have fun and, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, even when they're at restaurant.
Yeah.
Right. In the play stuff that you eventually... I love that point of him doing the bunny ears. It's the stuff she's going to find out afterwards.
That she'll look back on it, yeah.
Yes.
And it's also so 90s, too. You know,
that's
bunny ears were so 90s.
Right, and that's probably the reason, and that's I can explain with my review, this probably would have been a top 10 for me. I just love the experimental idea of it. It's very dangerous to do because it could gone very cheeky and very playful. I do like the concept, but I also like Tar, too, where it's very... you know, structured film and everything is meticulous, like a Kubrick kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But this is almost give the kids the camera and see what I get out of it. Yeah.
See, now I was mentioning to another critic I was talking to on Saturday about this film because we were talking. This other critic loved the film. It was like their number 2 film of the year.
And it's a little too
I
high
said,
for me.
like, I think it's a movie that I would need to revisit again in a year to know where I stand on it. Because right now I'm so flabbergasted with elements of it, but I'm also not sure if it worked in what she was trying to do, but did it work for me as an audience member as much as I think it did? I need time away from it because the longer I've spent since I've seen it, the more I have wanted to revisit the film. So I feel like in a few months I want to revisit it, and then maybe I could see if it would sneak its way in my top 10. As it stands right now, it wouldn't be, but that doesn't mean that it's not a fantastic movie that is probably going to be a criminally underseen one.
I agree. And there's like a lot of other foreign films, like Decision to Leave, will be under and appreciated. But yeah, as part of the thing, I think she has a great platform of Charlotte. I would love to see what she has next. If she wants to go personal, commercial, let's see.
I can't wait to see when Marvel picks her up. I'm just kidding.
But obviously she's comfortable doing it. Obviously she's comfortable directing, and I want to see more.
Yeah, exactly. I feel I've heard comparisons to Tuesday and Lapse, her 2 short films. With this film, stylistically, that this feels like a broader, more encompassing version of the style she chose. I want to see like how that style evolves into something maybe less close to the chest and less personal.
Yeah.
Take us on a different journey. And I want to see what happens with round number 2. So
maybe she can get Jesse Buckley.
Yeah.
And Paul to work together.
Oh, yeah.
And that may be a dream. All right. So, have you seen Aftersun? What does the title mean afterwards? Is this...
I don't know. I keep singing it like it's a song, and I don't know what it is.
It feels like a song, doesn't it? The whole movie feels like a song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let us know what your thoughts are on the Aftersun, because it's really more about after being a daughter. But let us know in the comments what you thought about the film, and you know, maybe what are your other hidden gems from last year? Films that you think were underseen but that deserved recognition. We'd love to hear those.
I think Return to Seoul, probably one of them, in EO.
Fair enough, yeah.
But we just didn't have the accessibility to those
That's
movies.
the problem, is accessibility. So yeah, let us know your thoughts down below on that. We'd love to hear them. Thank you guys for joining us. You can always find my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere from find podcasts, and new episodes should be coming up in a couple weeks.